Hello Morrowind world. Today I want to make a video about optimizing your Morrowind. I love Oblivion's music, but let me turn this down. So what do I mean by optimize it? Well, I'm talking about frame rates and FPS. I'm currently in Sage Morrow. You're probably wondering what this big rock thing is. That's actually the Battle Spire mod. But that's not what we're talking about here today. Maybe I'll show you guys that another day. I'll put a link down there anyway. But, you know, for me, graphics are one thing. But another thing is really just having a smooth game to play with. One that's not choppy or jaggy. It's very smooth. You can read my specs, my computer specs down below, so that's what I'm working with. But, you know, I used to have a 1060 6GB graphics card, and honestly, there wasn't so much of a difference. I mean, I've noticed some difference, but I've already optimized my computer so much, and you know, it's not always all about just getting like better hardware. So I'm gonna show you what exactly I did, and I'm gonna go into my settings in any file. Right after I take care of this winged twilight. Okay, so I'm going to do this pretty quickly. First of all, you need to get used to two things. Wherever you downloaded your Morrowind, I did mine on my disk drive. Program files 86, this is Softworks Morrowind data files. Actually, under it, there's Morrowind with a little gear here. So click on that. This is your ini file. I'll tell you what that is in a minute. The other thing that we need is I have my settings cfg file under my documents. So I go to my games, open MW, and then settings. This is your OpenMW cfg. We don't really need that right now, but this is settings. So here's what you do. So I'm going to show you basically some details what I did. So in my ini file, I set my max FPS to 0 for me in my rig. Now I have a 144 hertz monitor, so and I also have VSync turned off, but I'll show you that. I didn't really change much of any of this except just a few things. My light attenuation, so this is how bright light is. I have the constant set to 0, quadratic set to 1, and then I turned it down. So quadratic radius multiplier, I think this originally was 16, and I turned it down to 0.3 because the lights were too bright in my opinion. It's kind of unrealistic, and it's just hogging up RAM. So that works for me. What else? Move down here, and water, I pretty much kept it the same, although I did turn off my shaders in my refraction, but I'll show you that. That's not really necessary. Water is water. I mean, you can play around with that. Other than that, in my weather section, my cloud speed, I would go to every section. For rain, I would go to fog, sunny, all that. Weather clear, so I'll go down to cloud speed, and I think it was set to 1 or something, and I put it to 0.1 because the clouds move too quickly. So make sure you change that if you want realistic cloud movement for all of these. Cloud speed, turn it down. There's cloud speed and wind speed, so those are two different things, but I'll let you guys play with that. I'm mainly focused on my cloud speed. And then I think that's more or less it here. So now the real magic happens over in settings. So over here in settings, look at all these tabs. Okay, so you'll have something that looks very similar to this. Cache expiry delay, that's 5. Pointers cache size, I'm still not really like 100% sure what that means, but it has something to do with computing references. I set mine to 100. And then everything else, prediction time, I increased it to 2. This is the same, this is the same, this is the same. Preload distance, this thing right here really changed. I set it to 100,000. It's originally at 1,000. So preload distance. Now this seems like a lot. I increased it by 100 times. I went from 1,000 to 100,000. But the thing is, I did not notice that much of a difference in my CPU and GPU utilization. Both of those hover around like 45 to maybe 50%, which is very low. And I use very little wattage for my GPU anyway. So 100,000, you're basically preloading a lot of the game, and you know, if it's set to 1,000, nothing's loaded while you're walking around. Well, I mean, there are some things loaded, obviously, but when you come to the end of your square, your cell, it gets choppy. So, like for example, let me load here. This was just I was testing out the new Stroh's Mackay, and yes, I uninstalled it. That's fine. But let me show you what I mean by what cells look like. So I'm out here. Just set speed. Let's do 1500. So you'll notice there's this big cube that I'm surrounded by. So that is what is loaded. And when I come to the edge of that, a new one loads. But you see how for me, it loaded very quickly, and there was no stutter, there was no chop. If I had this set to 1,000, my screen would freeze. Now this is going on in the game world, as well as like everything else that's rendering, like the trees and the rocks and everything. But look at how smooth that is. See what I mean? I'm just coming to the edge, and it loads without any chop whatsoever. So actually no, I'll just keep that up. That's important. So this is one thing that I found. I know it looks ridiculous, and I never really considered it, but everything else, this is what I did for exterior grids, preload number of threads. That's good. I'm going to give you, there's actually this website, and I'll put a link to this here. This actually breaks down everything in your settings. So we're talking about cell settings. I click on this, and then, you know, we were talking about preload, cell expiry delay, prediction time, target frame rate. What does it all mean? And it gives you this little paragraph here that you can, you know, read and determine whether or not you want to increase or decrease. So preload number of threads 1. You know, preloading threads to 2 or 3 for a boost in preloading performance. So you just change that. So you come in here, you know, click on it, delete it, and then change it whatever you want. So that's what I did for that. Shaders, I have legacy on. Maximum light distance, I just put 10. I can't really tell a difference. Sound, field of view 80. That's my viewing distance. But another really important thing is I set my difficulty to 300 because I'm already God mode. This is a big one right here. Actors processing range. I set it to 10. So this is basically, let me see, hold on. I don't even remember what the default was. What is this under? Game. So I go to game under my table of contents here. Game. Actors processing range. Where is it here? Oh, wait, no, that's not it. Actors. There it is. So actors processing range Setting can be controlled, blah, blah, blah. Actors close to the distance softly fade in and out instead. So the default is 7,168. So that you can't even see them that far anyway, but they're being processed that far away from you. I set mine all the way down to 10. That way, when I'm in Balmora, the actors in Pelagiad and Caldera aren't, being processed too, because it's just eating up my RAM. So I put this to 10. Can't tell a difference. Shadows, I put shadow map resolution to this. I cut it in half. Distance, I kept the same. You can cut this in half, 1024 if you want, because these two things definitely, those are big ones. Also, you could consider changing. Then water, I kept the same. Terrain, object paging min size. So the default is 0.2, I think. Well, let me come back here. So terrain, object paging min size. Yeah, it's 0.01. So I turned it down a lot. So this is how many cells, like not cells, but objects, trees, rocks, buildings, get popped in. So the smaller this value is, the more objects you will see in the scene. So mine is very, very small. So I'm loading a lot. So that actually could hurt performance potentially, but I turned mine down because I don't like the pop-in. And my other settings kind of like counteract whatever loss in performance I get from this anyway. So you can play around with that. And then everything else, my ground cover for my Aussie mod, I turned it down from 1 to 0.9. Stomp intensity to 1. It was at 2. But that you can also turn it down to 0, but I don't like that. I like 1. It allows the plants to move when you move through it. So, those are some, and feel free to pause your video and take a look at mine and then alter yours accordingly. However you wish. And if you have any questions, I'm going to put a link to this website in this video because this will help you. But, this exists. Once you change your settings, you come into your launcher, settings, uncheck this because this is going to create a new mod list. So here's your data files list. So we don't want to create another one of these. So you uncheck that, then you click Run Settings Importer. And then you'll see a little bar go like that, and then it's ready. And that's basically it. Once you do that, there's other things you can do, depending upon what kind of graphics card you have. So, for example, I use nvidia, obviously. And if I go in there, I set mine to quality. Performance, you can set it to performance. But again, performance isn't actually as great as it sounds because the better performing your game is, the more FPS it's producing, and that can actually hurt because if your FPS is so ridiculously higher than your refresh, then it can cause tearing or things like that. So you need to have a balance. Here are my settings for Morrowind. I have basically everything turned off. Anti-aliasing, FXAA, that's on. That doesn't use a lot. Latency mode is set on ultra. This is NVIDIA's recommendation. Max frame rate off. I have my GPU set. Power management, adaptive. Highest available refresh rate. texture filtering off, negative load bias allow. Now texture filtering, it's on quality for me. You can do high performance if you have a low-end computer. But again, even if you have a low-end computer, you shouldn't have that much of a problem if you do all the other settings I showed you. Because again, you can get choppy if you set everything to like high performance, you know, low resolution, high performance, those two things, you are going to produce a lot of FPS, but that's producing more FPS can actually cause you a lot of choppiness if you're not careful, believe it or not. So it's not all about having FPS, it's having a smooth, consistent frame rate. These other things, this is on threaded optimization, on using more CPU threads, vertical sync is off, etc. So that's what that looks like. You probably have something similar if you're using AMD. So those are all things that you can consider. I have other things like I turned off a high precision event timer on my computer. You can set your system to high performance. I forgot where I actually go. Game mode is turned on. You can turn that on. Let's see, where you go under your graphics settings. I set everything to high performance. You click on it and then go to options, high performance. Things like that. You know, there are like little things that you can do like that for your computer to boost performance. But they have tons of videos like that on YouTube. Just look up how to increase performance for your game, and you can do that. So, all right. Well, if you have any other questions, hopefully this video helps, and you are able to get that smooth game that you so deserve in your Morrowind. All right, guys, I'm going to sign off now. Thanks for tuning in. I will see you next time.